We saw social movements, farmers and fishermen from all sectors marching, telling the United States and the United States and demanding that it lift the illegal sanctions that were imposed after Barack Obama signed the decree designating Venezuela as an unusual threat. Since then, more than 1,000 illegal sanctions have been imposed. The United States has lifted some that have to do with its interests, namely with Venezuela selling oil to the United States. And so today, with one voice, they told the United States, look, lift the sanctions completely. This will allow the Venezuelan economy to grow more, which has grown for 19 consecutive quarters. During that time, with its own strength, and if we achieve this with sanctions, what will it be like without the sanctions? At the same time, banners and photos of the presidential couple were seen during the demonstration, and it is also the countdown to the illegal hearing that will take place on March 26, Thursday, in the United States. So we were there, and we're able to prepare the following report for you.
The people's
dignity is intact.
The blockade. Venezuela is respected, and I stand with Maduro.
They demanded that the United States end the illegal economic blockade and also release President Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores.
Today, we are on the warpath, not only for the complete lifting of sanctions, but for the immediate release of our President Nicolas, Maduro, and First Lady Cilia Flores. That is why we asked the North American Empire, the government of the United States, and all those who follow it to definitively lift the sanctions that have harmed the people of Venezuela for so many years.
The streets were once again the canvas of a people who will not surrender. We are a peaceful people, a hardworking people, a united people who will never give in to the United States. And we ask for respect and demand that they lift the sanctions in order to improve all services and the economy.
With its own strength and illegal sanctions, Venezuela's economy has grown for 19 consecutive quarters. Without the blockade, it'd soar.
The migrants left. It wasn't because it was the best option. It was because the blockade caused so many problems here that, well, they had to say, but they're back now. They're back now because this is going to work out. And long live Venezuela.
The income of Venezuelan families will undoubtedly improve with the efforts that President in Office Delcy Rodriguez is making to increase oil revenue and to buy our crude oil at a fair international price from the United States government. The United States government itself has demonstrated this by having to lift sanctions in order to buy our oil. It's a reality. Memorial. In other words, there is nothing more real than the damage that the sanctions have done to the Venezuelan people, and that is why we will mobilize until they are completely lifted.
Oil workers, peasants, and fishermen from all sectors raised their flags in support of interim President Delcy Rodriguez. And the Secretary General of PSUD asked the opposition to unite and together as the United States to end unilateral coercive measures. He warned that sectors that promoted the sanctions are once again calling for the streets to
once again the unity of social movements. Because the main job that it has today is to try to divide us. To try to divide us. They know that if they go to an election, we will win the next election. Know that if they go to the streets, we will be in the streets. In any scenario, but we must remain united as a rock.
From this platform, they also expressed solidarity with the presidential couple.
Because this Thursday is the hearing of President Nicolas, Maduro, and Cilia Flores, who have been kidnapped in the United States, and we are
How are they?
very well, strong, very well, with great spirit, with great strength, and we are going to see a thin president, an athlete, exercising every day, a first-rate fighter who is also firm and alert, and we are going to be everywhere in the world raising our strength for them.
the Venezuelan people will remain in the streets demanding that the United States government completely lift the illegal sanctions. There are more then.
Well, that was a summary of what happened today. As I said, the streets will remain there to welcome each protester, each social movement, all those who continue demanding that the United States lift the sanctions so that Venezuela can have an Habana, and that translates into a better quality of life, sane llegarsi, hala al charvi armava, housing, and also high quality public services that could develop much more and at a better pace if these unilateral coercive measures from the United States did not exist. Of course, we will continue to support Venezuela.
Hello and greetings again, everyone. Welcome to today's Venezuela Solidarity Network online picket and webinar focused on the campaign to free kidnapped democratically elected president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and First Lady, first combatant, Cilia Flores, currently held in prison in New York City. As we are here today, and we've just seen in the video, people across Venezuela have continued to mobilize, and that is part of our discussion and panel today, as well as a workshop where we'll join together to write letters and go over all of the U.S. prison system's rules and regulations for writing letters to prisoners such as President Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores. I first want to say there is translation into Spanish available for this webinar. If you're planning on listening in English, you don't have to change a thing. All speakers today will be speaking in English, but I will just briefly introduce listening in Spanish and Spanish translation. You can see through the photos here, though actually I've just noticed they are kind of done basically largely for a English, choosing to listen in English. But para escuchar en español, busque el icono del globo y selecciones español. Para los que se conecten por celular, seleccionen la opción de más primeramente para ver el icono del globo. Y también hay una opción de silenciar el audio original para un sonido más claro. Y bienvenido y bienvenidas todas y todos a nuestra acción de hoy. Si tienes preguntas, por favor escribe en el chat y podemos asistir desde el chat, apoyar desde el chat. Y gracias primeramente a Giselle y Laura por su trabajo durante esta acción. And thank you, a big thank you to Giselle and Laura who are helping with translation here tonight. The Venezuela Solidarity Network is a North America-based network of organizations and individuals working to defend Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination against U.S. government-led sanctions and attacks. And I invite you to learn more by visiting our website at venezuelasolidaritynetwork.org. There'll be more information in the chat about how to join as well later. My name is Allison Bodine. It is an honor to be with you here today. I am joining from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I am the coordinator of Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice Venezuela Solidarity Campaign and an author of a book from Battle Live Ideas Press called Revolution and Counter-Revolution in Venezuela, as well as a founding member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network. My co-host here tonight is Jill Clark-Golub, who wears many hats and does a lot of important work for social justice and Latin American solidarity. And that includes work from where she lives in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area with Friends of Latin America, and then also campaigns such as America Without Sanctions. And Jill will introduce herself fully a little bit later, but it's my pleasure to be here with Jill as well. On January 3rd, 2026, the US government launched an illegal and deadly military strike on Venezuela. During the Trump administration's vicious military attack, which killed over 100 people, the US kidnapped the democratically elected president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and First Lady Cilia Flores, a flagrant violation of international law and Venezuela's sovereignty. And that is what we are here to discuss tonight. Because President Maduro and Cilia Flores are now being unjustly held in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York, facing fabricated and trumped-up charges of so-called narco-terrorism. But this attack on President Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores cannot be separated from the US attack on oppressed peoples across Latin America and around the world, especially the ongoing attack today against the people of Gaza and the people of Iran, who are currently under a US Zionist-Israeli war. So we invite you to consider that context as we discuss the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores here today, and join together in a letter writing workshop with which to send our solidarity, our support, and our conviction that President Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores will be free in the form of letters to them in prison. We are going to also have updates from the March 26th US court hearing, which people on the panel were able to be present and organizing at, and invite everyone to join their voice together in the international call for freedom for President Nicolas Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores in defense of Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination. Today's action is sponsored by the Venezuela Solidarity Network, as I mentioned earlier, and also Code Pink, Women for Peace. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce our first speaker. We're going to have, as I said, a panel at some time for discussion, and then we'll move into the workshops. And then Jill, I guess before you introduce our second speaker, make sure to introduce yourself fully. The first speaker is joining us from Venezuela, someone I've had the pleasure to organize with, to put our heads together and plan events all the way from Mexico to, here in the United States. Flavia Marquez, she's an organizer with the Bring Them Back campaign in Venezuela and the Cumbe Afro-Descendant movement. She's also, among other work, an advisor to Venezuela's National Assembly, which is the parliament of Venezuela. Flavia, you are our first speaker here tonight, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you to all of you. Good evening to you. And it's an honor for me to be invited again to bring to you the reality, given the fact that we are always demonized by the media. Venezuela is always on the news, but sometimes with the wrong side of the story. And this is the case right now regarding the situation of our kidnapped president and Congresswoman Cilia Flores, our First Lady, kidnapped after the bombing of Caracas. I know there has been previous forums here, preview conferences where we have discussed already what happened, but I never get tired of explaining to people that there were things that were lies, like the bombings were only on military targets. That's not true. They bombed scientific places in Venezuela, researcher spaces. Our school of mathematics and physics was bombed. Also, a place where we have storage medicines for dialysis and others. And of course, civilians also died during that bombing. But what I always also share with the audience is that I'm very amazed and proud of the maturity, the political maturity that the Venezuelan people have shown. It is so high and so surprising or unique for the world that sometimes it gets confused by being maybe docile or quiet. And that's not the case for Venezuela. We're still, as you were able to watch at the beginning in the video, we are on the streets protesting and demanding the return of President Maduro and also the lifting of sanctions and also the return of Congresswoman First Lady Cilia Flores. And on the other hand, we keep moving forward with the plans or the traditions we have with our community. For instance, on March 8th, at International Women's Day, we have the first voting for the communes. As majority of you may know, communes is a way of organizing we have in Venezuela, where the community is empowered to develop and design their own projects, and then they bring it to voting on a specific day, along with several areas. Maybe the women's have one project, the youth, the workers, the Afros, and the community votes on the program to receive funding from the government, and that funding goes directly to the commune. So after January 3 and after all the new actions that you have been watching on Venezuela, we still continue with our path of revolution in place. Also, other thing I also bring up in these discussions and these seminars, we hear rumors or the measures that the government is taking right now, our president in charge, Mrs. Delcy Rodriguez, seem to comply with everything that the U.S. wants. I will explain two things. First, we know we have our president kidnapped, and we know that whatever we decide to do as people, government, we know it will hurt his situation in the States. And as a matter of fact, I guess you already know also the difficult situation we are confronting right now because of fact sanctions are prohibiting the payment for the fees of the lawyers of President Maduro. I'm sure Mr. Camacaro, our friend Camacaro, will talk deep about this. But that is one of the obstacles we know we learned when we had our diplomat Alex Saab kidnapped in the past, that whatever we do, they will suffer the consequences without being in the shoe, isolated, not visiting, not able to have phone calls with the family. So we already know how this goes. And this is a strategy from our government also because we have no history of violence. We have no history of civil war or the bloodshed in our country. So we are doing our best to keep it that way. And also, as maybe it's not in the news, in the headlines, sometimes we still are being surrounded by the U.S. fleet. The ships are always surrounding the Caribbean Sea at the north of Venezuela, vigilant of every export-import we do. Also, we have the U.S. Southern Command active in their so-called Southern Spear operation. There's still strikes on the Caribbean Sea. They're still killing so-called narco-terrorists. No one can confirm. Around Venezuela and other Caribbean islands like Trinidad, Tobago, and other countries, also in the Pacific side nearby Mexico and Colombia. And this is a fact that sometimes don't get to the headlines, especially now that so many things are happening in the world. And a third point I would like to raise is, when you have doubts, look at the facts. And one of the facts is that the first person or institution, if you want to call it that way, that set foot on Venezuela was the CIA. If this was a co-conspiration, so docile, and everyone was on the same page, we didn't have that as the first visit to our country, if you can call it a visit. As you may know, officially the head of the CIA was here. He was the first U.S. representative, I must say, to be in Venezuela, meeting with the president in charge, and kind of trying to set the rules on what was going to go. But on the other hand, if we read Latin American history, as we all know, the history of these matters in the region, CIA is needed to be able to control. And my personal point of view is, it is the way the U.S. government, this government in office, I'm not referring never to the U.S. people, that's different. We always make the difference. They won't allow that what happened with Chavez, the revolution, and what happened in Latin America will happen again. They are trying. They think they can control it. They think we will be surrendering. They think it is about one man. They thought so when they killed, as we think, President Chavez, or if you want to say when President Chavez died, they thought the revolution will die with him. And years later, we're still here, we're still organized, we're members of the parliaments, we are mayors, governors, and we are on the streets, we are the unions, we are the women, we are the Afro-descendants. And other fact I want to share with you regarding the so-called opposition, the opposition that you see on the headlines saying we celebrated the bombing is an opposition that it does not live in Venezuela for a long time. They left the country. They are not admired or followed in Venezuela. We have an opposition, yes. They are part of the parliament. They just won elections with the same system the PSUV or the government party won elections. That system, the other opposition, the far right opposition said is not working or is, manipulated. And they are mayors also. They are the minority, but they are there playing by the rules, respecting sovereignty, and, trying to bring changes in their own way. So I will leave it up to here. I guess we have more speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Flavia, for that indomitable spirit that reflects the people of Venezuela. And we know that it is that attitude and that true high level of revolutionary education that you referred to that will get the Venezuelan people through this difficult time. Thank you so much. Allison asked me to tell you a little bit more about myself. I am a coordinator of Americas Without Sanctions, a project of Sanctions Kill. I'm also on the coordinating committee of the Nicaragua Solidarity Network and a member of the Black Alliance for Peace Solidarity Network. And we have some exciting news about Americas Without Sanctions, and I'd love to share that with you at the end of the webinar. But right now, I know we want to hear more about President Maduro and first combatant Cilia Flores. So I would like to introduce our next speaker. Victor Coronado is a Dominican American natural gas first responder and union member of the IBEW Local 1820 from Perth Amboy, New Jersey. He is a member of Anticonquista, an anti-imperialist media collective, and recently joined the Venezuela Solidarity Network. A longtime supporter of the Cuban Revolution, Victor participated in the Nuestra America's Solidarity Convoy to Cuba in March 2026 and is active with the Hands Off Cuba Committee. Thank you for being with us today, Victor, and you have the floor.
Sure, thank you. So a real quick question for the hosts. Did you want to talk? Did you want me to talk about my trip to Cuba, or did you want me to continue on and talking about Venezuela?
Allison?
Yeah, sounds good. Hey, Victor.
Hey.
I was thinking that something would be really excellent to hear from you is how those are connected. So feel free to share about your trip to Cuba. Definitely let people know. But, you saw firsthand U.S. imperialism's impact in Cuba. And we want to establish more now than ever that the U.S. hasn't left the Caribbean. And part of that is their continued attacks on Venezuela. So just whatever connections you see,
Sure.
definitely love to hear.
Absolutely. Sure. So it was my first trip to Cuba. Folks can Google the convoy. There's both good and bad press, I think, that you'll find. My trip to Cuba was interesting. It was fascinating. So as far as trying to make the connections. So one thing I kept telling the delegates as I was there, it occurred to me that, I'm sure all of us have gotten into conversations with folks about the Cuban economy over the last, X how many years, right? And a lot of times you get into conversations where people will acknowledge the effects of the blockade, but you always get the, yeah, but. And it sort of dawned on me that while I was there, that because it was just so striking, what the blockade has done to the Cuban people. And then let's back up a little bit. So the revolution triumphs in 1959, you know, and I'm gonna, try to sum up. This is like a bad summation of what happened, but Cuba nationalizes a lot of the industry, a lot of American kicks out American corporations, kicks out the American mafia, um, and the United States, there's a tit for tat, and eventually, the United States decides to place an embargo, what the Cubans call an economic blockade. And this blockade has been in place since the 60s. We know, Fabio just did an excellent job explaining what happened on January 3rd in Venezuela. And on January 29th, President Trump issues an executive order titled Addressing Threats to the United States by the Government of Cuba. And he labels Cuba an extraordinary and unusual threat. And essentially, not essentially, he creates an oil blockade. And so Cuba hasn't received oil in 3 months. This morning, I believe, a Russian tanker arrived, and it's going to be enough oil. Once they process it, they're going to have enough oil for about roughly 12 to 15 days. And President Trump last night, oddly enough, said that he doesn't care if they get oil. But again, let me continue on with the blockade. So we're there. We're seeing the economic situation firsthand. It is bad. The Cuban people are very resilient, but it sort of dawned on me that you can't have a serious and intellectual conversation with folks with regards to Cuba and the economic situation, if the conversation doesn't start and end with the blockade. And so I refuse at this point to have any conversation with anyone where, if the entire conversation doesn't focus on the blockade, and more recently the oil blockade imposed by the Trump administration, then we're not having a serious conversation. Anytime I've had this conversation with my fellow Dominican compatriotas, and I mentioned to them, can you imagine a blockade against the Dominican Republic for 60 years? Everyone unanimously says, "Oh my God, yeah, that would be terrible." So they get the connection immediately. But I often get kickback with the "yeah, but," and we can no longer accept that. And so the Trump administration, this particular iteration of empire, MAGA, Trump, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, I keep saying to folks, is an existential threat to Latino Americanos everywhere. I encourage folks on January 3rd, after they did what they did, they had a press conference at roughly 11 a.m. And when you listen to the press conference, and I've listened to it, I believe, 3 times now, they're not even talking like normal politicians. They're talking like gangsters. And they're talking about Latin America as though it's like they want to take us back 200 years. You heard the comments recently by President Trump says, "I'm going to have the honor of taking Cuba." The reporter was taken aback and said, taking Cuba? He said, "Yeah, taking Cuba. I can do whatever I want with it." And so this type of language is just crazy. It's insane. He's threatened Mexico. He's threatened Gustavo Petro in Colombia. He's threatened Central America. It's a bizarre. We're living this is a very strange, extremely dangerous time. The Cubans are being very careful about what they're saying in the media. Fabio, I'm so glad you said what you said, because sorry, I get a little sensitive about this issue. What the Venezuelans are going through right now, they have a bazooka to their head, and they're trying to negotiate with the United States. And Delcy Rodriguez, acting President Delcy Rodriguez, has been very clear that she's dealing with an irrational political figure. And it's a nuclear power. And while they don't have the military might that the United States has, what they have is a moral superiority. And so they're trying to negotiate and navigate all these things while their country is being threatened. It was threatened immediately. Again, going back to that press conference at 11 a.m., he talked. I really strongly encourage folks to watch it if you haven't watched it. And I know it's difficult to stomach Trump and Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio, but the way that they talked, it makes it very clear what was what was at stake. And so, if for those who criticize the Chavista government, watch the press conference at 11 a.m. on January 3rd, and if you're still questioning what's happening in Venezuela, if you're still criticizing or even going so far as to condemn the Chavista government, again, you and I can't have a serious conversation, intellectual conversation. We're not speaking the same language. We're not analyzing it the same way. I don't know how, they literally threatened Venezuela with a second wave immediately. And that's what Delcy has had to deal with. She's in charge of 30 million people. And as Fabio said, they have their president kidnapped. And so the whole region is walking on eggshells because the United States is just threatening all of us. With regards, going back to my trip in Cuba, I will let me highlight some of the positives, and where I hope that we have some light at the end of the tunnel. I just saw a tweet, 10 minutes ago or something like that, that saying Trump is saying that he's going to end the Iran war. I don't, again, you can't take him for his word because he's just, one day he's here, today he's there, but I think what I did see in Cuba was just a word I heard a lot was solidarity. Solidarity. And we know that the Cuban Revolution is from its inception has been about solidarity. And it was just a beautiful thing to see for the first time. I've been reading about Cuba for, forever, for 20 something years. In my mind, I always imagined Cuba being a certain type of way. And all this trip did was confirm and affirm what I already believe about the Cuban Revolution. It was inspiring. It was amazing. And yes, the Cuban people are resilient. And I'm not just saying that just to say, oh, they're going to be fine. No, they're resilient. They're a dignified people. They're a proud people. There's so much history there. There's so many things that I was fascinated by. And so if there's anything we can hold on, to in terms of hope, just understand that solidarity does exist. The Chavistas, the Fidelistas in Cuba, the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, and we know that there's a movement all over Latin America. We've had a lot of retreats. We've had retreats in Bolivia, and in other places. Mexico is on a progressive path. There is light at the end of the tunnel. We can't just stop. We have to continue building solidarity. We have to continue building this movement within the imperial core. I will say, we had a lot of wonderful conversations. A lot of people came out of that convoy, as far as the delegates are concerned, super inspired, super energized. And I think, we have to continue to do this work. The Cubans and some of the Chavistas I know, they keep reminding me, they say, Victor, you have an important role to play because you're inside the belly of the beast and you're raising you're raising consciousness, you're organizing people there, and we need you. Part of my critique with the so-called left here in the United States is that we don't talk to one another, we don't organize with one another, we work in silos. Everyone wants to pump their chest to claim they have the correct political revolutionary line or ideological line, and we're not trying to figure out how do we make headway into the political system here in the United States. The deputy foreign minister of Cuba, I follow him on Twitter X. I follow a whole bunch of other political figures in Cuba, and they're paying attention to our congressmen and congresswomen. And I know some folks on the left don't want to hear this because, again, it's not part of the correct revolutionary ideological line for some folks. But we have to start making headway and create a progressive, I'll even say revolutionary movement here in the United States where we start winning seats. And so we need a popular movement here in the United States. We need to start winning seats, and we need to continue the solidarity work that we're doing. And we need to stop questioning whether or not the Chavistas are doing the right thing in Venezuela, whether the Cubans are doing the right thing in Cuba. That's not for us. We're not there. Our job is here, and our job is to provide solidarity with those folks. Um, I'll end it there. I have a lot of anecdotes. I could say much more, but I think I'll end it there.
Thank you, Victor. Yeah, I mean, where you've ended is very important and fundamental to the Venezuela Solidarity Network. Why we formed in the end of 2023 was to hopefully break through some of that siloed organizing to really build a united front based on defending Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination that stays away from interfering in the internal affairs of Venezuela, because as you've said, we have to clean up our own. I don't want to use the backyard because that's just what the U.S. rhetoric says. But we have to clean up our own business first before we can go around criticizing other people. And I encourage anyone who is motivated by what Victor said to really join us in the Venezuela Solidarity Network and come to our next meeting. I'll post it in the chat now. They're open for people to join and to get involved in organizing hopefully more coordinated actions, collective work, and tying together struggles as we're doing here today. Talking about freedom for President Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores necessitates talking about U.S. attacks on Venezuela and U.S. attacks on Cuba. And so that's some of the connections we wanted to bring to today's discussion. The next speaker is William Kamikaro. William is a co-founder of the Venezuela Solidarity Network and the Bolivarian Circle of New York, Alberto Lovera. He's also a senior analyst for the Council on Hemispheric Affairs, COHA, a writer, a thinker, an activist, an organizer who has some perspective to share with us today, especially from as a Venezuelan, but also as a Venezuelan in New York City, in the city that is imprisoned where President Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores are imprisoned. So thank you, William. It's good to see you here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, sounds great.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me today. Yes, we have been involved in several events. Uh, we had the 26th event here, the day of the hearing, that I will say that was very successful. We have a group of people coming from around 16 different groups. Some of the groups are national groups uh, protesting and demanding the freedom of the president, Nicolas Maduro, and the First Lady of Venezuela, Cilia Flores, in front of the federal court in downtown Manhattan. So that's something that we have done already twice, and we basically yesterday have a meeting with the DSA people and talking about the revolution in Venezuela and getting engaged with us to participate in other events together in the near future. And next, basically very close, this coming Friday, as a part of our monthly actions to demand the release of President Nicolas Maduro and the First Lady Cilia Flores, the action that will take this coming April 3rd will consist in a good that will be in Good Friday. No, it will be a vigil in honor to the martyrs of those who fell during the January terror attack on Venezuela. This month's action reflects in many ways the previous two. We have already, this is the third one, and it will be already 3 months that President Maduro has been incarcerated and kidnapped. And we are getting every third of every month gathering in front of the uh, prison. And this month action, as I mentioned, reflect those two. The main difference lies in that we will be reading the names of those that has been killed in January 3rd, and also so we have some kind of a religious anti-imperialist approach to that event, and we will have some speakers that we are inviting, especially from priests and some pastors, people that are in some way connected to the liberation of theology. And so we will have candles. We are expecting to have the same number of candles that they represent every people that have been killed in January 3rd. So we're encourage everybody to attend. We have a small group of, as a group of that basically is formed by people that are local, and that is called um, in defense of Venezuelan sovereignty, and we organize all these events in New York City. The objective is, first of all, to raise the question of the kidnapping and all the international violation law that has been committed against the Venezuelan people, and also to denounce the imperialist war and the destruction of life, and to argue churches and faith communities to adopt firm anti-imperialist stance. That's our main commitment here. To argue organizations to build coordinated popular resistance and demand a free President Nicolas Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. So no USA regime change, and also basically abolish ICE. So, and also denounce the genocide in Palestine. This is some of the issues that we are raising in this coming demo that we're organizing in front of the prison where President Maduro is incarcerated with his wife, First Lady Cilia Flores. And we are expecting a number of people, especially people from churches, to come and to join us that day, because it's Good Friday. I know that we know that some religious group will be with us, and we think that thanks to the weather we get a very nice crowd. Um, Also, this is a very important day that we always organize something monthly in the first and the third of every month, because we want everybody to we want to remind everybody what happened in January 3rd, and we will be organizing this every month. So we also invite other communities from outside to take the lead in one of those days. So we know that, for example, people from Baltimore, they will come, I think, in 2 months with a big delegation from Baltimore. And I think that another group from Massachusetts will be soon here, and that we have their own gathering, and I think in 3 months. So we're inviting other people to join us from other part of the country that are willing to travel here and to have their own gathering, and we will be there supporting them. And this is very important. The other thing that basically I can say is extremely important to make a lot of noise, to make them down on every, in the case of Alexa, we know that because we work with the Alexa for several years, with the Alexa case, basically we knew that was important to have some kind of presence every hearing, every court date, and to let them know that some people were there in support of, in support of, in the case Alexa, or in support of President Maduro and First Lady. It is extremely important. We are not only worried about this, that they have been, President Maduro has been isolated, in that his situation has been changing. He's now able to see his wife a little more frequently, and have been, they have been flexibilizing his isolation, but we need to make possible for him to receive visit, to get some people from the movement to visiting him, to get some key figures that can come from Venezuela to visiting him, and to make possible what Pérez Esquivel, the Nobel Peace Prize for Argentina, mentioned in one document, that he sent to the United Nations, and when he's requesting that the Human Rights Commission should request to the government of United States to allow a Human Rights Commission to visit President Maduro with certain frequency and to check that he is in good condition and that he is in good mental condition and his wife and that they are not suffering any kind of torture or any kind of humiliation in that prison. And so we need to do that. So we need to put a lot of pressure, and this mobilization are in that direction to trying to fight for their freedom, to fight for the freedom first of all, and to try to humanize this horrible condition for someone that is a president and to be incarcerated as a criminal in one of the most horrible prison of United States. So that those basically are our demands, and that's what we are doing. That's why we are doing all this um, protests and demonstration all over the city. So the other action that we have is coming from the New Yorican community, more than 6 groups of people from Puerto Rico that are present here in New York City and some surrounding areas. They will be having 22, that is 22 is like un gathering of people you can join to play music. So they will get a bunch of people from Puerto Rico that will be playing a bomba, and then we have some people dancing and playing a bomba to President Nicolas Maduro and also to First Lady Cilia Flores. So that will be, I think that 18. I think they sent already you have it there, Alison, the advertising that maybe you can share with them in some moment and the screening. So basically, it's very important for us to have the New Yorican community also reading poetry, singing and dancing in front uh, of the prison and with picture of President Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores, and that will be a very very nice event that everybody is invited to join us. If people are around the city, just drop yourself around and just you can yell free, free, free Maduro and free Cilia and dance some New Yorican music there. So we really, those are some of the action that we are organizing in these coming days that we have organized already, and we are expecting to bring more activities around the prison and around the city because we need to be mobilizing people every single, week, every single time to remind the New Yorkers and the United States people that the government of the United States commit an atrocity in Venezuela, that they bombed the country, they bombed the city of Caracas, they killed more than 120 people, and they kidnapped the president and the first lady, and we are not going to turn around in front of this human rights violation, in front of the international law violation. We need to really make everything possible to get them back to Venezuela. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, William, and thank you for your remarks. Thank you for sharing with us all that you are doing and the comrades on the ground in New York are doing. And um, wow, that's really impressive, and it is so important. I just want to just reiterate what you say about a spiritual vigil with liberation theology, clergy to remind people of those who were killed in this operation, that it wasn't just a shock and awe, it was real human lives that were lost. And also, thank you for your
Gail,
continued presence, which we know is so important.
Gail, I just want to say that this remind me several people, and of course, Father Miguel Escoto is one of those. Be hero that always is with us in these moments.
Thank you, William. And yes, the that spirit unites all of our peoples. So now I have the pleasure of introducing Carrie Zaremba, a writer and organizer based in Brooklyn, New York, who organizes with the BAP Solidarity Network, a fellow member of the BAP Solidarity Network, and also in the National Network on Cuba. Carrie, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jill, and hello, everyone. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of the Black Alliance for Peace Prisoner Support Team. BAP is an organization grounded in the understanding that war, policing, and prisons are interconnected tools of empire. And so we organize with the interpretation that we are at war and that prisoner support work is a form of counter warfare. So to start, the primary function of the US prison system, both domestically and internationally, is to contain revolutionary potential and undermine the sovereignty and self-determination of colonized and oppressed peoples. The United States claims that it holds no political prisoners or prisoners of war, while simultaneously criminalizing resistance movements across our Americas. We see how categories of crime, terrorism, narco-terrorism are repeatedly deployed to transform dissent into something prosecutable. We see these foreign terrorism designations particularly used in the context of the Palestine Solidarity Movement, most recently with the designation of the organization Samidun. BAP understands the January abduction of President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Cilia Flores not as an arrest, but as an illegal kidnapping that represents a regime change operation, an escalation of hybrid warfare, and a modern application of the Monroe Doctrine, also now known as the Donroe Doctrine. The message is clear that nations that chart an independent political or economic course will be made examples of. So before a US judge, Maduro declared, "I am a prisoner of war. I am still the president of my country." And so for context, a prisoner of war is someone captured by enemy forces in wartime, and a political prisoner is someone detained for resistance to imperial domination. His claim in declaring himself a prisoner of war, he follows a long Black radical tradition where prisoners of war and political prisoners have announced their status as such in order to refuse criminalization, reject colonial jurisdiction, and redefine imprisonment as warfare. And so this reframes prisoner defense itself as a form of anti-imperialist struggle. And this is a lineage that we saw in particular throughout the 70s and 80s with movements like the Puerto Rican National Independence Struggle and the Black Liberation Army. So both Maduro and Flores are detained at the Metropolitan Detention Center, which is just miles away from me. It's a federal jail that has been widely criticized for dangerous and degrading conditions described as hell on earth. Key concerns include restricted communication, isolation from news and political life, psychological warfare, the fact that the government is violating his constitutional rights by not allowing Venezuelan funds to be used for his legal fees. And it's also worth mentioning that he's detained alongside another political prisoner, Tarek Basrouk, of the Palestine Solidarity Movement, who is detained on trumped-up hate crime charges. So there are also reports that inside, other incarcerated people are in the facility are referring to Maduro as president, and this reveals, in my opinion, a shared political recognition emerging from inside the belly of the carceral state itself that connects a shared consciousness between domestic political prisoners and international political detainees. Political prisoner Mumia Abu-Jamal, who's perhaps the most famous political prisoner in the United States, addressed a rally outside of MDC Brooklyn 1 month after the detention, and he said, quote, "Maduro and his wife are not subject to American law. They should be returned home, period, and the natural resources of Venezuela should remain in the hands of the people of Venezuela." This reframes detention as a form of imperial robbery and is, again, an example of the shared political consciousness between domestic prisoners and international political detainees. We should also understand what's going on as a form of gendered counter. Oh, that's great to link the Mumia call. As a form of gendered counterinsurgency, Cilia Flores holds the political title of first combatant, and her imprisonment represents a form of gendered political violence that targets revolutionary women's leadership and attacks political families to break movements, both materially and psychologically. This mirrors tactics used against the Black liberation movements inside the United States, particularly the Shakur family with the incarceration of Afeni Shakur and Assata Shakur. BAP calls this system more broadly prison or carceral imperialism. Other examples would include U.S. trained regional police through the International Law Enforcement Academy, mass detention infrastructures such as that in El Salvador, and deportation pipelines that disappear migrants into indefinite detention. And so we see how the same militarized logic operates everywhere, both through ICE raids in U.S. cities, sanctions regimes abroad, kidnappings of foreign leaders, and the criminalization of organizers in the United States. So sanctions, prisons, and military operations are thus different fronts of the same war that I mentioned earlier. BAP has a campaign called the Zone of Peace campaign that you can look up. It has a website, and BAP's vision of making our Americas a zone of peace means the demilitarization of the Caribbean, dismantling foreign military presence, ending carceral cooperation across borders, and rejecting prisons as instruments of geopolitical control. So we see the same machinery capable of snatching a president abroad is the same machinery that snatches working class and colonized people from their homes in the United States. What's going on is not just about oil. More importantly, it's about an alternative to the US, NATO, EU axis of domination and the right of peoples to determine their own future. The labeling of Venezuela as narco-terrorists is part of this war of disinformation designed to legitimize intervention. And we also saw in December, President Trump signed an executive order officially designating fentanyl and its core precursor chemicals as weapons of mass destruction, which also recalls the war in Iraq, the quote, weapons of mass destruction that was used as pretext for invading Iraq. And so we see the same wielding of these terms as a precursor to foreign intervention in foreign affairs. To close, from a prisoner support perspective, prisoner support today means defending Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores, defending all political prisoners and prisoners of war, and exposing imperial narratives that criminalize sovereignty. What's going on is a show trial designed not merely to prosecute individuals, but to place the entire Bolivarian revolution itself in the dock. So it's criminalizing a political project that dared to assert sovereignty, redistribute wealth, and challenge U.S. hegemony in the hemisphere. BAP demands their immediate and unconditional release, the recognition of their political prisoner and prisoner of war status, and we want to uplift our campaign to build our Americas as a zone of peace. Lastly, I would encourage everyone to stay for the letter writing portion of the event, as letter writing is one of the most powerful tools that we on the outside can use to uplift the cause of political prisoners, and it's a way of asserting their humanity and rejecting the isolation that's imposed by the US carceral system. And so please stay for that portion of the event. That is all for me, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Carrie. We've not ever had the pleasure to meet in person, but I really appreciate your contribution to the panel today and the work of the Black Alliance for Peace for President Maduro and Cilia Flores and all other important anti-imperialist campaigns. We have had a really excellent and I think very comprehensive panel here today. We've had voices from Venezuela, the United States, come together to discuss the importance and significance of freedom for President Maduro and Cilia Flores. And every speaker also touched on the importance of mobilizing and organizing in their defense, that it's not enough for us, of course, to just know about what's happened, but that we also must take united action. And I think that that is significant at this moment when there are so many struggles happening, whether it's in the United States. I haven't talked a lot today, of course, about Canada, but Canada is right beside the United States in all of their attacks. And I think that I've just been very moved by everyone's conviction to continue this struggle. And there's a number of articles that have been posted in the chat and more information. I think rather than go into like a traditional Q&A today, I know that speakers have probably been monitoring the chat, can get a feel of kind of what people have been discussing. I don't want to cut our letter writing portion too short. So I'll just ask the speakers if we can go ahead and do like a bit of a wrap up, comments, maybe 1 or 2 minutes each, share any relevant links in the chat, anything else you want to share, please feel free. And we can just start at the beginning because Flavia turned on her camera. So she's willing to start, that says to me. So Flavia, any reflections on the panel and work going forward you'd like to share?
Yes, I want to stress the point that it is very encouraging for our president and the first lady that you can send letters and postcards to them. As a matter of fact, President Maduro published through his son, Nicolas Jr., who is a congressman recently, this weekend, a letter on the news in Venezuela in his Instagram. I encourage you to go there because it's a very interesting message using the Bible. So very clever way to communicate with the people and send messages about how he's feeling. And on the other hand, this son of President Maduro also shared with us that he's in good health, that of course he has lost weight, as he said in the video, but he's writing a lot. He has written more than 10 notebooks already because at the beginning he was not allowed to have books. Now he can have books, but well, he's strong in the struggle, and he sent a very nice message to the Venezuelan people, but also to his family, which is do not feel regretful or angry at anything. You need to live life, so be happy. And happiness, I think, is the common feeling of the Venezuelan people and the Venezuelan revolutionaries. So even to these tough, unique times we're living in Venezuela and in the world and in the region, we know we can make it. So thank you for your support and solidarity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Flavia. And sorry, I've lost my spot on the screen. 1 second. Thank you, Flavia. Just Victor, do you have any closing remarks, or William? If you don't, that's okay as well.
I would just say that I hope folks do stick around for the exercise. Thank you for sharing the link, Allison. I'm checking it out now for myself. One other thought, I hope folks, I haven't visited Venezuela. I'm hoping to do that as well. I hope folks consider going to places like Venezuela, going to places like Cuba, so you could see. I'll give you a little anecdote. So a reporter from who's based in Havana, from Radio Havana, said to me after my situation where I was detained and my cell phone was confiscated. She said, "I hope that this is not going to discourage you from coming." And I said to her, so I wrote to her back and I said, no, I'm going to always be a revolutionary worker. And then her response was, well, then you need to continue to visit Cuba, because you need to nourish yourself with revolution, and Cuba is a good place to learn. And it was very, very touching when, I had to keep reading it over and over, and I just thought it was just a very cute way to to kind of uplift my spirit, considering what happened. So I just wanted to share that anecdote with folks. Visit Cuba because it'll nourish it'll nourish your revolutionary soul, and it's a good place to learn.
Excellent. Thank you, Victor Coronado. I'll also just say that Anti-Conquista has also been encouraging people to write letters and participate in the letter writing campaign. So please, if you don't already, follow Anti-Conquista online on Instagram and share their posts also, and read the analysis. William, do you have any final comments you'd like to make?
Yes, very quickly. Thank you again. Remember when we start the campaign to get Alex out of prison, I I called Carlos Lopez Rivera and to see he join us in the campaign. And then he said to me something very important is to write letters to someone that is in prison. That will help a lot, especially mentally, and will he said to me that he was receiving so many letters that he was busy all the time doing exercise and reading and responding letters. And that was very, very good for his mental health. So I think that we should do it. We should try to write letters, send letters to President Maduro and also to the First Lady, Cilia Flores, and also to participate in every single action in front of that ugly prison in Brooklyn. So we should be everything possible to have a presence there and to do whatever we can to make a lot of noise with the hope that they can at some point hear us and realize, that they are not alone and that we are around and that we are always watching for them. So basically, that's my advice, and thank you very much.
Thank you, William. Carrie, I'm not sure if you have any closing comments. You could also, if there's anything that I bring up during the workshop portion, I know you have a lot of experience with prisoner solidarity and with letter writing campaigns, so please feel free to jump in then as well. Jill, oh, sorry, yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
Oh yeah, sorry. Nothing to say other than check out BAP on social media and thank you to the host for organizing this event.
Awesome. Thanks, Carrie. Jill, co-host Jill, if you'd like to come on, I know you have a few announcements, any reflections you want to share. I'm going to go ahead and get us set up for the letter writing portion of tonight's action and webinar.
I don't want to take much time before we get to the action and webinar, but I just want to share a couple of announcements that are very relevant to Venezuela Solidarity Network. Sanctions Kill Americas Without Sanctions is hosting, is going to be on a webinar hosted by the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition in conjunction with Venezuela Solidarity Network and National Network on Cuba about child deaths caused by unilateral coercive measures. And we're going to do case studies on Venezuela and Cuba showing the direct relationship between the escalation of these measures and child deaths. And then we'll be joined by Ajamu Baraka, the founder of Black Alliance for Peace and of the North-South Project for People-Centered Human Rights to talk about the need for a new framing of human rights. And that's going to be April 19th. And on April 22nd, we are going to be having a briefing in Congress about the same topic, how unilateral coercive measures cause child deaths. And we'll be having the author of a big study about this speak, as well as someone from Doctors Against Genocide and experts on child health in Cuba, looking at Cuba as a case example and the need to lift the blockade on Cuba. So I'm sure this will all be publicized through VSN channels, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you, and thank you to all the excellent speakers. I look forward to this workshop now.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Jill. Yeah, I think this has been a really excellent panel. And as I said, a continued motivation for us to step up our organizing. I believe I posted in the chat earlier a new statement from the Venezuela Solidarity Network Coordinating Committee called Venezuela Needs Our Solidarity Now More Than Ever. It is one of many, similar articles and reflections that have been written calling people to continued action for Venezuela. I will go ahead and repost that in the chat and encourage people to share it with folks that they're in discussions with. And before I go into the letter writing workshop, I also do want to announce another campaign that is not writing a letter to President Maduro and Cilia Flores, but is writing a postcard to US President Donald Trump. This is an international campaign launched by the Venezuela Solidarity Network at the US-Cuba Normalization Conference just a few weeks ago in New York City. It is a postcard addressed to Trump demanding that all charges against President Maduro and Cilia Flores be lifted and they be released immediately. The back is pre-addressed and there's a message of solidarity with President Maduro and Cilia Flores and an outline of the reasons that they should be released immediately. You can write us. I'll put the information in the chat about the postcards campaign. We can put some in the mail for you. I can send you the PDF and you can print them locally. But it is an international campaign that you can use this, in the coming period as the weather gets nicer in North America. Hopefully many of us are going to be out at protests, setting up tables and organizing. And these postcards are an important way to approach people on the street about the kidnapping of President Maduro and Cilia Flores and the necessity for their defense, and then to flood the White House with a constant message demanding their freedom. So I encourage people to write us about that and get involved with the postcard campaign. Now, writing letters to President Maduro and Cilia Flores. I know there's perhaps people here on the webinar that have taken the time to write a letter to these prisoners of war and have hopefully not had their letter returned, because there are many rules about the sharing letters. So first of all, on the screen, I have the addresses. We can also put those in the chat. Those are the addresses, as they must exactly appear on any mail or letters. Letters are, of course, censored in different ways, which we don't have the ability to control, but we can control making sure we follow their regulations so that the letters don't get turned away for ridiculous reasons. So black or blue ink only, lined paper only. You must include a return address. You should assume that all mail is opened and inspected. You can include drawings or symbols, no stickers, tape, or glue, no scented paper, and no extra kind of enclosures on the envelope. So really, the advice is to use a very standard as possible envelope with which to write your letter and your message of solidarity. You could describe an action that you've organized in your community. You could talk about a conversation that you've had where you've convinced someone to join the campaign for their freedom, an experience you had in Venezuela. There are so many ways, I think, to help President Maduro and Cilia Flores stay connected to the outside world during their time in US prisons. A piece of lined paper and a pen. And we're going to play some Venezuelan revolutionary music for about 5 to 7 minutes. If anyone has questions or anyone that has experience, I can post the slides in the chat for sure, or has experience with writing letters and has any other tips to share. I'm really happy to invite you to make us, add to this knowledge about the best way to send letters. I'm going to, play some music, and at least all of us can get a start on our letters. There is a question in the chat about typing versus handwriting. From what I gathered, handwriting is important, but if others have typed a letter and not had it returned, feel free to write in the chat. I wanted to read out a comment I think is important from Julie that says she's written several times and had 2 from Cilia returned because there was a flower on one and then a Valentine was in a pink envelope, which was not permitted. So really it has to be, you have to be very careful in order to ensure that they get successfully delivered. Hi again, everyone. I hope you have had a chance to start your letters. Leo, I see your hand is up, so I'm going to allow you to talk if you had some insights to share on any of the questions that have been asked. If that was not intentional, that's okay too. And I will go ahead. I think I already stopped sharing. Okay, so this was a brief moment with which to, discuss our, begin to write letters to President Maduro and Cilia Flores. We hope to share more resources as often as we can, encourage people to have events in your local communities to get together to write letters. Often writing letters can be combined with a movie or, political discussion, and encourage people to participate in that. I'm going to begin and to reach out to the Venezuela Solidarity Network if you need ideas for resources and films to show. If you'd like a speaker, we have members that are kind of across the US and Canada and can hopefully find someone that would be able to join you. I'm going to go ahead and start promoting people to join the webinar as a panelist. That is the time in which you will be able to turn on your camera. So if you'd like to participate in kind of this group discussion and ending to the webinar, then go ahead and raise your hand or accept that invitation to be able to join the webinar so that we can do a group photo together. And as I mentioned, do some chanting for freedom for President Maduro and Cilia Flores. I think folks should hopefully be getting those invitations as we go along. Yeah, it's always, if you raise your hand, if you know how to do that on Zoom, it helps me find you a bit faster. I also, definitely want and say again a big thank you to Giselle y Laura. Your work is done. Thank you so much. And let's just see if anyone else wants to join the group photo. As I said, folks I know started their letters. It's great to hear that some people had written letters. I had heard, multiple letters being returned because they are strict, but we can definitely work to get them delivered. And I encourage people not to give up because many people have also had their letters successfully delivered. And we know how they are so important to prisoners of war and political prisoners. So I think I've updated, allowed everyone to speak. Flavia or William, if you want to say something, I think you can just unmute your microphone. And Leo, you raised your hand earlier. It might have been for the photo, but if you have anything to add, go ahead. Let's do some chanting together. I think let's make sure everyone has the ability to unmute yourselves. You can unmute yourself if you'd like. It might be a cacophony of noise, but it is an important way of feeling our unity together. So let's say loud and free President Maduro and Cilia Flores now.
Free President Maduro and Cilia Flores now.
Libertad.
Libertad.
President Maduro and Cilia Flores now.
Free President Maduro and Cilia Flores now.
Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela.
It's great to see you all. Yes, and Brandy, beautiful sign. We'll see you in the streets.
Beautiful. Yes.
I heard William issue an invitation to anyone that wants to come to New York City. He'll help you organize a protest or an action at the detention center. So that will bring William lots of work to do, but it's important. So.
Okay. Thank you. Free Cilia. Free Maduro.
Free Cilia. Free Maduro.
Yeah. Send those letters. Write us for postcards. Hasta la victoria siempre. Until victory always.
Venceremos.
Venceremos. Paso fuerte.
Thanks, everyone.
Venceremos.
Venceremos.